But point of view is several things. It is, first of all, clearly the choice between first and third person narration, and within third person narration, the question is it all-knowing, omniscient narration, a narrator who knows everything and can divulge everything at whatever time he or she pleases, or is it third person limited narration, where even though the character is looked at from the outside, from a narrator's point of view, it is only that particular character's life that we hear about. So, and with first-person narration, of course, character and narrator are the same. Now, the difference, the basic difference between those three narrative points of view are the closeness between, in that all-important triangle of character, narrator, and reader. First-person character and narrator are the same, and we as readers see the world through that character's eyes and therefore identify with this person. So that's an incredibly intimate relationship. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the all-knowing character who looks at all-knowing narrator who looks at several characters at the same time, with godlike authority, if you will. And again, in between is the limited point of view, where the character is different from the narrator, but we may be able to understand or hear what this character feels and what he thinks. So in other words, if you look at or if you're deciding which narrative point of view to choose, your first question should be is how intimate do you want that relationship between character, narrator, and reader to be. And there is no right or wrong decision. There are only, I would say that genres may gravitate towards certain genres, towards certain narrative points of view, but there's always the exception. So, for example, memoir definitely gravitates towards first-person narration, because, of course, a memoir, the whole point is to show the reader the world through the memoirist's eyes. A memoirist writes about his or her life because they want to tell us where they're coming from, what they've experienced, and what has made them who they are today. So that is very easily to be done with first-person narration, because you can talk about you, because the writer talks about I. Similarly, what coming-of-age stories are often written from first-person point of view, but I think for a little bit different reason. Coming-of-age stories are usually written from a child's perspective. So, and what better way of allowing the reader to step into a child's perspective than letting us completely live through and in that narrator. For me as an adult, it is difficult to understand how a child thinks, perhaps, and so if the narration is nothing but that child's perspective, I have a chance to live in that perspective. On the other hand, historical fiction, adventure stories, and science fiction, tend to use the all-knowing, omniscient point of view simply for the reason that world building is tremendously important in these genres. A historical period, or a fantasy world, or a science fiction world is clearly very different from the world of your readers, and therefore you have to spend a lot of time and page space, to bring that world to life. And that is sometimes very difficult to do if all you have at your disposal is one single character's point of view, and that is true for first-person narration or for for third-person limited, where only one character's point of view is given to us. They may not have access to the way the entire Brave New World or Strange or Future World works. So that's why those stories gravitate towards omniscient narration. With other genres, such as mysteries, I think the question as to what point of view you choose is far, far more open. And the question that should guide you there is not necessarily only is it first person or third person narration, but really which character do you want to use as the vehicle for your story. So take detective fiction or mysteries, for example. Are you telling the detective story or the potential victim's story, or the criminal story? Those are very different stories. The detective story is likely going to be a whodunit. The victim story is a thriller because nothing has happened yet and we see the crime as it unfolds. That's the basic definition of a thriller. And if it's the criminal story, it might very well be a chase where you either do or you don't want the criminal to get away. So that it really, the question there, or the perspective and point of view there, decides very much upon honestly, the content and meaning of your story. So that's the question you need to ask yourself. What is your focus? Whose story are you telling? Who is the best vehicle for your plot? And to be perfectly honest, I would even say that that most stories will work with different points of view. It just depends then on what story you tell. If you look at a drama, maybe it becomes clear there. In drama, say, let's talk about a love triangle. So whose story are you telling there? If you're telling the story of the philandering husband, you will be telling a story of guilt, I would say. If you're telling the story of an unsuspecting wife, you might be telling the story of denial, or later on, once you find out, it might be a story of revenge or depression or despair. And if you tell the story of the lover, it could be the story of unfulfilled love. So it really, the meaning really changes depending on who tells the story and whose perspective you choose. So if you bring those two things together, how close do you want your reader to be to character and narrator, and whose story are you telling? You have a lot of questions to answer, and based on those answers, you will likely choose the point of view and the perspective of your story.